Good morning, everyone. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Fran Igoe. I work with the Local Authority Waters Programme. Before that, I worked in rural development on water-based projects, and before that, I worked in fisheries. I'm going to give a short presentation on funding for communities to engage in protecting waters. So just to give an overview, first of all, I'll address why community groups should be supported to engage in water protection, what funding is out there, the accessibility of this funding, LAWPRO's role, taking a strategic approach, and the ambition that we could be taking as we move into the next cycle of the Water Framework Directive. So first of all, why should we fund communities to engage in water protection? Well, first of all, it increases communities and their engagement in water bodies in a meaningful way. It creates a sense of pride of place, fulfillment and enjoyment and satisfaction. And of course, it's a way to leverage other funding streams. Ultimately, the objective is to increase water quality or improve water quality in doing so. It is important to bear in mind, though, when we talk about funding for communities, that we need to think about funding projects and separately funding community groups themselves to continue working in this area. When we think about engaging communities and how they can engage meaningfully in a water body, it is important to think about how they can participate. And John Dewey, the famous American philosopher, he came up with the idea of project-based learning, whereby you learn better by doing. And this is very relevant for community groups if they get more involved in working on their water body. They'll get to understand it better. They'll understand that these are complex systems, these are dynamic systems, and also that these are systems that need to be protected where human pressures come to bear. What types of examples of funding streams are out there? There's a range of funding streams, starting from small funding streams to more significant funding streams. If we start at the smaller level, projects typically £5,000 or less, we're looking at local authority-led schemes or funding schemes, our own community water development fund. Then as we move up into the larger scale type funding streams, such as the Peatlands Community Engagement Scheme or the Heritage Council, the Arts Council, these schemes are getting bigger. Then into LEADER, we're looking at EU Life schemes at this stage now, in addition to the inland fisheries and the FLAGS programme. And then finally, the larger EU schemes, these are schemes such as the EIPs, LEADER, Interreg. These are the larger funds that are available. Now, if we look at what types of projects can be actioned by communities using these various funding streams, at a lower level, we're looking at awareness raising, signage, that type of stuff. So these are opportunities for community groups to actually engage in their water bodies, but they are important in their own right. Then moving on up to larger scale projects, visioning exercises, getting involved in invasive species, getting involved in groundworks or in stream works, riparian works, and so on. As the projects become more complex, they involve more stakeholders, and then ultimately we're looking at sub-catchment to intra-catchment projects across river systems. So what type of projects do we encourage in LAWPRO? Basically any project that aims to improve water quality. Small projects, large projects, it doesn't really matter about the scale. We do encourage for project promoters to look at biodiversity and climate as part of their overall project when they are applying to us for funding. And we suggest that they start small and use those projects as a pilot to develop larger projects moving forward. The types of projects that they can engage in, there's a whole range of projects that they can, I suppose, get involved in, from river restoration to fish passage projects of removing weirs to ease fish passage, to invasive species control, to silt trapping, and then the urban areas looking at various measures which can address surface runoff and pollution, such as rain gardens or other sustainable urban drainage system features such as swales or wetlands. All the time we encourage community groups to think about the projects in the context of where they live, localize the projects, make sure that the projects are fit for purpose, that they will get the water quality benefits, and that they are appropriate to the area that they reside within the catchment. So think the river catchments as part of the project development. This is important, particularly as the projects start to grow. There are, however, constraints for community access, and we've been working a lot in this area, in particular with the LEADER programme, which has been very useful for us to understand what are the issues affecting, or the barriers affecting communities engaging in projects. There's a list there on the left-hand side of your screen. everything from the capacity of communities, do they have the administration support, etc. Do they have the funding to match significant funding? Nearly all funding streams require some form of match funding, and the larger the fund, obviously, the larger the match funds that needs to go with it. Special permissions, landowners may give verbal consents, but it may be reluctant to give legal permissions as such. Special permissions in the context of appropriate assessments and EISs also can be very costly. Communities often don't understand water projects, so there is a requirement for animation around this. This has been identified at the higher levels within the leader companies as an area that we need to spend some time just explain to people what types of projects they can get involved in. Ultimately, environmental projects are more complex than the standard projects which a community group may be involved in. And then, of course, animation of the overseers, other elements of the program that might have an oversight role in the assessment of projects. So to address these issues, we have been engaging with LEADER, the LCDCs and the Department of Rural Community Development to try and make the program more accessible for community groups. We produced a booklet, a guidance for LEADER companies. The department looked at the rules around LEADER to try and facilitate planning for environmental type projects. And also this year we have been engaging with the chief officers of the LCDCs themselves. In parallel to this, we've been working with the Department of Housing and Local Government. The department set up a community water development fund to increase engagement in this area. We found that the existing funds weren't fit for broader community engagement. In 2020, you can see the open call for this fund. You can see the variety of projects on your screen in front of you there, everything from awareness raising to river restoration type projects. The fund also supports the formation and the support of rivers trusts. When we look at the breakdown of that particular call, you can see the types of groups that are engaging at the moment. So a whole range of groups from festivals right down to tidy towns. And what is interesting is that the types of groups that are engaging clearly reflect broader society, tidy towns groups and other community type groups. So we're quite pleased that program is reaching the groups that it needs to reach. But there are other ways that community groups can engage in water management, not necessarily applying direct to funding streams, but can actually partner up with other projects, such as those led by local authorities. There's a good opportunity here, particularly in urban areas or in the environs just outside towns, where there are projects to improve community access or public enjoyment of the public space. The example here on your screen is one in Tipperary, where the community group started with LEADER and then worked with the town village renewal scheme to develop a project which is a walk, but it also aims to do some river restoration work to improve the quality of the river adjacent to the walk, bring in some wetlands, and also generate or develop a outdoor classroom for the local school kids to engage in as well. The project is all about turning the town towards the river. So when we think about all this and we think about larger projects to affect water quality changes, my views on this is moving forward is that if we do want to see larger scale projects, we will have to increase collaboration across the funding streams to try and maximize their impact at a minimum. Ideally, taking a multi-agency approach, not just at development, but also at the assessment and the regulation phase as well. And identify the areas where these multiple benefits can be generated. Generally, agency interactions should be supportive and open, should engage with communities. The regulation and oversight should be collaborative, and the bureaucratic burden should be kept to a minimum. It's important to remember that community volunteers are busy people, and we want to focus the community groups where they're best spent, where their activities are best spent, that is doing the actual projects. So looking ahead, environmental projects, they're not like the ordinary projects, they are more complex. We need to start thinking about a landscape approach, incorporating communities and integrated catchment management, looking at taking a broader view, and encourage smart projects where we can be more targeted, maybe with some of the funding. Finally, and to wrap up, communities clearly have an important role in the protection of water. There are capacity issues for communities which needs to be addressed to help sustain projects. The funding needs to be targeted and accessible for these community groups. And I'm just putting it out there now as a question, is there a need maybe for us to look at a new funding framework to support projects in the water, biodiversity and climate area? Thank you. Before I finish up, I would just like to say a special thanks to all the communities who've been working with us, my colleagues in the LAWPRO program, the community water officers who are out there animating, and Siobhan Thompson, who's our funding lead, Ray Spain and Bernie Flaherty, who gave me some assistance with this presentation. And if you have any questions, please use the app. And I hope you enjoy the rest of the presentations that follow this. Thank you.